Hey, good morning, everyone. Chuck from Functional Fly, and today we're gonna tie some streamers. Actually, two different versions of the same streamer. The Black Ghost, I think, is a great fly to learn to tie as your first streamer. Teaches you all of the fundamental proportions. You get to work with floss, which can be kind of fun once you get used to it. And then on the Black Ghost streamer, there's a couple of different ways that you'll see them fished. The simplest way, and so if you're just getting started as a tyer, we're going to do a Marabou Black Ghost. Very simple wing to tie in, but it's got phenomenal movement in the water and is very productive. I'm also going to go ahead and show you the more classic original version, which is a Featherwing configuration. And so two different ways to tie the fly, but a great fly no matter which way you do it. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so to tie the Black Ghost, the hook that I have in the vise is a Mustad 9575 streamer hook. The thing I like about the 9575, if you're going to tie the Featherwing version, is if you take a look right here, you can see that this is what's called a looped eye, down eye hook. That wire return when you are tying in a Featherwing, because you're going to have four feathers back to back, gives you a nice stable platform to tie that in. Other streamer hooks that just have the ringed eye like this don't give you quite the same platform, so it can still be done, but you have to do a little bit more tweaking of the feathers to make it work. So we'll go ahead and tie this on the 9575, and I'm going to come in right behind that wire return, and I'm just going to put down a layer of thread. It's a nice idea when you're working with floss bodies to go ahead and get used to laying down that full layer of thread. With all the floss that this is going to have on it, it's not mandatory. You could leave more open turns and still get a good result, but it's a good practice to get into because it will ultimately give you a better product. I'm going to take the thread back to right about where the hook point is, and then I'm going to tie in some fine silver tinsel. I'm going to bind that in on the back side of the hook. And then this is an area where you will want touching turns because you want to have a nice flat or smooth platform, for that tinsel to wind forward. So I'm going to take that back to a point just before I get to the barb of the hook, and then give that thread a couple gentle turns to take some of the twist out of there, and that will help that thread lay a little bit more flat on the hook shank. And then I'll come back forward at 5 or 6 turns. Now I'm going to wind the tinsel on. My first turn of tinsel is on the bare shank, and then the second one I'll come up onto the thread. It's important to maintain your tension as you're wrapping this tinsel, because if you don't, it's going to slide all over the place and introduce gaps, and you really don't want to have that. You want to have just a slight overlap. On your tinsel, just to make sure that you don't have any gaps. And I'm going to stop at a point just before the hook point. Tie that off with a couple of turns. And trim away the excess. My tail material for this is some hackle fibers off of a yellow hen cape, and I like the length on these fibers to be more or less about 1/3 to 1/2 of the length of the hook shank. Your own personal taste may vary depending on the result you're trying to achieve, but I think that's a good starting point. And I'm going to tie this in. I like to tie it in about 1 turn of thread ahead of where I tied off the silver tag on that. And the reason is that right now that tail is sticking up just a little bit. When we wrap the floss body, that will come over all of this and help push it back down just a little bit, and everything will lay much more smoothly without a lot of added bulk at the end of the body. Now I'm going to tie in the rib, and the rib is a medium silver tinsel. And I'm going to tie this in, and this is going to be a little bit longer. So again, we're creating a tapered body, or I should say easing the transition on the body, so that as we wind this forward, we don't have any steps or abrupt drop-offs. I want that floss body to be as smooth as possible overall. So now as I wind this forward, I'm being really careful with my touching turns. I'm going to keep that tinsel on the back side. And I've seen other tiers who will deliberately tie that tinsel in on the front side to try to fill that gap where the looped eye hook return is and build a transition right in this area. I'm not especially worried about that on this fly because of where I'm going to stop the body and the volume of the body. It's going to be a non-issue, which you'll see in pretty short order here. So I now have a fairly smooth body here, and I've got the thread right back up to that hook return, and now I'm going to tie in some black floss. This is 8-strand black floss. Not always super easy to find, but when you can find it, it's great stuff to work with. If you don't have 8-strand, you can get 4-strand or even single strand, and then just fold over or create multiple strands of it. Or if you're tying smaller flies, you may only want 2 strands or 4 strands. But for larger flies like this, the 8-strand works really well. So I'm tying that in, getting it secured, and then I'm going to move my bobbin as far forward as I can get it so that it's not in the way as I'm starting to wrap. Now with the floss, again, important to maintain that tension. And you'll see as I'm starting to wrap this back, that floss is flattening out just a little bit, which is a good thing. So then what you can do is you can adjust the amount of overlap to give you the result you're looking for, whether you want a very slim body, in which case you'd have minimal to no overlap, or you want to have something a little bit more substantial. And that's what I'm working towards here. I don't want it to be a super fat body, but I do want it to have a little bit of shape and volume. Now if the fibers start to get away from, if they start to separate too much, then what you can do is you can just twist the fibers in your hand, and as you twist those, that will bring everything closer together. But right now I'm happy with the way this is laying down. Now as I get back close to that tail, there's already some volume back here from where I tied in the tail and the rib. So I'm going to reduce the amount of overlap so that I don't have any strange bump. And now I'm going to take that floss and I'm going to come all the way back, so I'm covering up everything up until where I tied in that silver tinsel tag on the back. And now you can see how that last turn just took that tail and laid it out nice and straight off the back. And now I'm going to go ahead and start forward. It's starting to bunch up a little bit, so I'm just going to stroke those fibers, get it to flatten out just a little bit. And if you're new to tying with floss, sitting and tying up a half a dozen or so of these is a great way to get started, because there's nothing like repetition to help you get better at what you're doing. So don't be afraid to sit down. If the first 2 or 3 don't give you the look that you're looking for, don't sweat it. We all got started somewhere, and you will get better as you do more and more of these. So I'm going to rotate that down, trim that off on the bottom. Another turn of thread just to make sure everything's locked in. And now I'm going to take my tinsel and bring that forward in a rib. The number of turns on these is going to depend on several things. The overall length of the shank, the overall width of the tinsel, and your personal preference. Some folks might like to have a lot more turns. Certainly if I were going to tie this on like a 9x long or 10x carry streamer hook, then yes, I'd have far more turns. Most Atlantic salmon flies are sort of an unwritten rule about using 5 turns, but this is being tied as a trout streamer. So I'm going with, I've got 6 here. I think that looks good in terms of the proportion of the silver to the black. So that's what I'm going with. Again, trim that off. A couple of extra turns just to make sure everything is secured. And I'm happy with the way everything is looking right now. For the throat is also that same yellow dyed hen cape. And so to tie this in, I'm going to grab the feather at the very tip. I'm going to pull those feathers down. And this tip section is where I'm going to tie in my throat. I'm going to tie this in right on the front side right here. Wind back just a couple of turns. Then come forward again. And I'm going to grab that little tip of the feather, pull it back over itself, and bind it down, and then come forward. Then come in with my scissors and trim that away. By tying it in and then tying it back over itself, it locks that feather in so it's less likely to pull out when I'm wrapping the throat. Now to fold those fibers back a little bit and just start to coax them in the right direction. I'm holding the feather straight up with my right hand. I've wet my thumb and forefinger to coax those fibers back, and then as I start to wrap, I'm going to hold that first turn of fibers back and then push it under with my left hand. And then start to make turns coming forward. And depending on the size of the fly and the quality of the feather, probably going to make about 3 to 4 turns. With that hackle. Then come in and tie it off. Take those fibers, wind back just slightly, and I like the proportion on this. I like that throat to come back 1/2 to 2/3 of the way down the length of the body on this size hook. And then I'm just gonna, again, wet with my thumb and forefinger, coax those fibers down, and right now I'm doing a couple of different things. I'm lashing down any little edges that still show up, but I'm also building a ramp for tying in the wing. And right now I'm pretty happy with that. Notice that I've got a little bit more of a flat spot, and if you have any stubborn pieces, you can come in and trim them either with scissors, or you can take a pair of tweezers, or even your fingertips, and just take those out of there. But I want that wing to be able to sit low over the body. Now for the wing, I'm taking a piece of white marabou, and here's what the marabou feather looks like. These come off of a turkey, and as you can tell, these fibers are super fine, so they have outstanding movement in the water. And what I like to do is I like to have the wing on that be, I like it just short of the tail fibers on there. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got that measured off. Take one more look. And now I'm going to use a pinch wrap to secure that. I'm not going to let go of that marabou yet, because I'm going to put about 2 or 3 good strong turns using about as heavy a head thread pressure as I can without breaking the thread. And this is something that I'd rather have you break the thread a couple of times when you're first doing it to learn what your to learn what your limitations are, or what the thread's limitations are, because you do really want to secure this. This stuff will slide all over the place if you let it. And so I have that there. I'm going to come back and now start to build thread head. And that is now, I'm confident that that's secure. So I'm going to come in and trim this marabou as close as I can. So if you were wondering why we left a little bit of extra room behind the hook eye, this is the reason. The marabou fibers do tend to want to go all over the place here, so it's nice to have a little bit of room. And streamers typically have a larger, more elongated head than some other flies anyway. So this is fine. And at this point, to make sure that everything stays in, I'm going to take a little bit of cement and dab that into that marabou on the front. And now I'm just building that head. Making sure that all of the white spots are covered up. I'm going to come back, give this one more final trim to get longer pieces away. If you wanted to, you can actually take a razor blade and cut everything off. But that's not going to be necessary here. We're doing okay. And now what I'm looking to do is just build a smooth, symmetrical head. Finish that. And there is your Marabou Black Ghost. Now, mentioned before that we would go ahead and do both versions. So I have already prepared a body up to the point of the throat. And so now I'll go ahead, tie back in with my thread. And this wing is going to be comprised of 4 feathers off of a white hen cape. 2 of them were chosen from the left side and 2 were chosen from the right because the curvature that you get as you come up either side, opposite sides will work so that you can put them back to back and create a single unified wing that matches up very well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to take these 4 feathers and bring them together and align the tips. And you can see that once you have those together, now you have a single good looking wing, and you can work with shaping that so that it curves and hugs the line of the body of the fly. On the feather wings, I like to extend it out beyond the tail just a little bit. That's just my personal preference as compared to the marabou. So I like that length right there. I'll pinch and hold right here. I'll strip those fibers away, and I don't need all of this stuff down here, so I'm going to trim some of that down so that I can work with just bare quills up here. And now that I have that, you may have to work a little bit, kind of use your thumbnail to straighten those fibers so that they are laying truly side by side, all 4 of them. If they are twisted, then they're going to want to roll when you put them on the fly. Now, we talked about having that hug the top. One of the ways to do that is to go in on the bottom side of the feathers, just go up an extra 4 or 5 fibers and strip them away on that underside, and that'll help it lay down just a little bit more smoothly. So I have the length I'm looking for, got the position I'm looking for. Now I'm going to go ahead and, again, always hanging on to the wing until I have it secured comfortably. I'm going to rotate the hook around so that I can see the top and make sure that all 4 of those wings are laying in next to each other, and you can see how those are laying in nice and straight. Now I can let go of the feathers, and you can see that everything is laying the way it's supposed to be. And now you can kind of preen that down and get that to hug the line of the body. Now we're not quite done with the wing yet. I'm going to come forward a few more turns, and I'm still leaving a little bit of room behind that hook eye. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these fibers, and just like we did when we tied in the throat, I'm going to fold those stems back over onto themselves to make sure that those wings never pull out. Once I have those in place, I'll come in, trim away the remainder of the stems. And we are almost done. The final step to the feather wing, and this is purely optional, is the addition of jungle cock. Now, jungle cock is a feather that can be difficult to get a hold of, and there are some rather strict rules in terms of how you can purchase it. You want to make sure that I would say go through a reputable fly shop or someone within your own country, because importing these from one country to the next cannot be done legally without appropriate documentation. So it just makes it much easier if you stay within your own country. And this is what the neck looks like. And these nails, or eyes that they're called, are tied in on the sides of Atlantic salmon flies and a lot of classic streamers to represent the eye of a baitfish. And so I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of these out, hopefully without damaging the eyes. And those are good. And I'm looking for the length on these to be about, again, half to 2/3 the length of the body, or about the same length as the throat. And with jungle cock, the shape of the quill is different. On the hen hackles, they are square. So if you line them up back to back, they'll lay in nicely against each other. Jungle cock are not that way. They're more of an oval. So what I like to do is come in and trim down some of the other fibers here, so that as I get right next to the quill, I have these very fine stubs that will allow the thread to get purchase on it. So I'm now going to take these two feathers, hold them side by side with the tips matched up, and bring them down on either side of the hook. And that one looks okay. This one just needs to be coaxed into position a little bit better. May take a few extra turns just to get everything straight there. But now I'm happy with that. And as we did with the others, bring those feathers back on themselves. Trim away the excess. And now I'm going to do my final layer of thread, just to create smooth cover over everything. Going to need to build it up a little bit at the front. Whoop. Okay. This thread is sliding off the front, so give me just a second here. Normally I have my tying wax here and I don't have it right now, so I'm going to back this off just a little bit. And this is a little bit of a cheat, but it's something you can also do if you don't have tying wax, and that is put just a small drop of cement in there. And build that head so that it's symmetrical and smooth. That's also one of the advantages of working with a thinner thread, is that it does allow you on those rare occasions where you need to take a few extra turns, you can do that without building up too much bulk. Just as we did with the other one. Put a nice glossy coat of lacquer on the head, and there is your finished Black Ghost. So there you have it. Get yourself some floss, get yourself some Marabou. If you want to try the Featherwing version, I encourage you to jump in on that too. Tie these up. I like to do them anywhere from 10s down to 6s for the most part. Get out there and swing them. It's a great fly to fish, a fun fly to tie. Thanks for watching, and keep following my videos. Appreciate it. Have a good one.